Well, thank you. Thank you for coming over to my presentation. First of all, who has been at the Enterprise Agility talk yesterday? Couldn't get in, okay, yeah. It was busy, okay, I see a few hands, nice. Well, this talk will be a bit of complementary to that talk, but also a standalone talk, of course. Well, first of all, I'm Brienen from the Netherlands, working at Avisi. We start using the products internally first, and then started designing and implementing our first plugin. That's numbered headings for Confluence. Yeah, and we added a few of the plugins now, like undo transition for JIRA and then XSD viewer for Confluence again. Well, at the moment we do consultancy services around Atlassian tooling, and in that I'm working with many companies, helping them with JIRA Agile, but then turning out to help them with implementing Agile, often also in a larger scale. What I'm going to talk about, first I do some about the difference between waterfall and Agile, a short introduction, then look at what challenges you'll run into when implementing Agile at a scale, and what solutions I often implement at different companies. So when I look at Agile and Enterprise, I actually see two things. I see a big organization that is hard to and slow to steer in a new direction. And I also see small teams that can change quickly and at high speed. And combining these two things, that's a problem. Well, if you look at the traditional method, you'll see something like this. Who does know this cartoon? I expected a bit more hands. It's quite famous. It's the traditional way of working, and actually also giving you a traditional problem with the waterfall method. It's a bit like the Chinese whispers game, where one person tells a story into a people's ear, and then this person passes it on to another and another and another, and then in the end you hear a complete different story. And that's what exactly is the problem in the traditional enterprise. Of course, industry learns over time, so they invented all new methodologies like Scrum, DSDM, Web, XP, etc. And then at some point in time, a couple of guys sat together and discussed on some common ground. And then in February 2001, the Agile Manifesto was born. Who knows about the Agile Manifesto? And who can name me one of these 4 core values? Anybody? Actually, people over processes. Anyone else? No documentation? No. Exactly, working software over documentation. So no documentation is not Agile. It's rather having priority over working software, rather enormous amounts of documentation. So the 4 core values are pretty well known. But there are also 12 principles in Agile. And the 12 principles, I find out that they are not that known as well. And I think if you want to move Agile and to become Agile, then you need to learn these 12 principles and follow these 12 principles. And in my next few slides, I'm going to take a few of these principles and see how this impacts in the enterprise. The first principle of 12, is actually on satisfying the customer. Satisfying the customer on early and in continuous delivery, but satisfying the customer. And if you are in the enterprise world, then you often see management based on expenses and cost, rather than on adding value to the business. And these big organizations manage their costs and resources, but forget that the IT is also adding value to their business. And if you only look at cost, how can you then satisfy your internal customer? Next is then working together with business people, one of the principles. Often you see that business is located on a different building or even in a different country than IT people. So how can you then work together on a day-to-day basis? Or changing requirements, even late in the process. Embrace change. That's what Agile is all about. what you often see is that scope is fixed and that the only thing they can manage on is budget and resources. If you fix the scope, you're not being agile because it will mean that you cannot implement the highest priority story that is adding value for the business. So looking at scale, I'll first give you a basic example of a company that I work for often. And these companies are in the size of around 2,000 employees, 300 people in IT, and about 10 agile teams. That's what I've been doing quite a few times. And 10 agile teams is about 100 people. So the rest of these IT people are in project management, business alignment, architectural departments, test departments. If anybody has been to the talk yesterday of enterprise agility, then you'll know that this is not agile at all. Even if you have agile teams, once you have still test departments doing tests afterwards and designs up front, you're not being agile. You're just doing an agile process in a waterfall method. So what challenges do I run into in these enterprises? First of all, documentations. Enterprises have years and decades of experience in creating Word and PowerPoint documents. And these documents live everywhere, different versions even of the same document on email or on your local machine or in file shares. And if you're really lucky, you can find all these documents in one place in for example, SharePoint. And, well, I don't know how about you, but I have never read any of these documents. Second is planning. Agile is all about planning. And what you see is they plan your little sprints, and the sprints add up to a release. But then if you look up in the management layers, project management is still running their old methodologies against these agile teams. And upper management is still managing costs and expenses rather than looking at business value. So if your whole process is not aligned, then Agile will not work. But if you have a large company, you'll also have a large infrastructure and a complicated infrastructure. And a complicated infrastructure brings all these teams working on different components and having dependencies on each other. And managing all these dependencies is a challenge in itself. So when I get in a company, I always say, okay, give me a team of people from your organization that help me implement Agile, because I'm not staying longer than 3 months or so. Maybe longer, but not a lot, not a lifetime. So I need a team that helps me implement Agile in the organization. And this team has to run Agile itself. It has to set the example. And it has to solve the impediments that come out of your Agile implementation continuously. And it has to keep doing that for years and years in a row to steadily grow into Agile. Because when I go further and I set the expectations of this project, I'll end up telling them, hey, this will take time. You'll have to change the way you're working, you have to change the people and their day-to-day work. So it takes you a lot of time. And it will change your organization. It definitely will change your organization, even to a big impact. So if you want to do it, if you want to take this step, it will need persistence. Keep on going in small steps and measure and look at back on how you're doing and going forward. When you want to make this massive change, you have 3 areas where you have to look into. And these are people, processes, and tools. The people is the biggest group, and it's also for them that's taking much more time to adapt to the change than anything else. But also the process, or you have seen the process of the agility model, enterprise agility model yesterday. I'm introducing a new one. There are probably more. It doesn't really matter what process you take as long as you map your own process on the 12 Agile principles. And as for tools, well, we've got great tools already. So I basically basing my work on the Scaled Agile framework. If you want to know, you all have a handout now. I'm not going to dive deeply into every detail of this framework. So if you want to know more about it, just go to the website. You can see the same picture there and click every icon on it so you have more information on it. Or read on the books about the framework. They are very good as well. Looking at the framework, I take out a few things, a few important things out of it for my presentation today. And that is 3 levels of planning and 3 levels of tracking. This is actually a very general take on it, but it will give you enough context for the rest of my talk. The first level of planning is the portfolio level. And the portfolio level is where you set out your global roadmap. And this is a continuous process. Each quarter of a year, you look into your portfolio again, and you change your roadmap accordingly. Then you have the program or the project level, the application level, where you divide all your portfolio items into releases. What release is coming up next, and what are we going to do in that release? And so slowly you set milestones to change the course over time, continuously. And of course, the team level is where everybody is already working Agile, or at least, otherwise you wouldn't be here, I suppose. The Scaled Agile framework is also adding 3 layers of tracking your progress. On the portfolio level, you have epics, and epics are then broken down into features, application features. And these features are then broken down into stories. And having this gives you a clear overview of from all the way from the top to the bottom, what epics on what big changes you want to do, and which stories are implemented by it, and vice versa. These epics and features that are invented by the Scaled Agile framework, are not really invented, but the definitions that they give to them are not fixed. So and you can change your definition for your own process and organization. And when you're using JIRA, I tend to find epics on the portfolio level a little bit difficult, because epics are so much tied in JIRA Agile to stories. So therefore, I prefer having epics on the middle layer and themes on the top layer. Themes in sense of business themes and architectural themes. So business themes for adding value to the business, and architectural themes for preparing your landscape for future changes. Well, I make a different view on it, and then you get a simplified version where you have the 3 levels of planning and all the items for tracking as well. Well, when I come into an organization, quite a few tools are already available, because they normally call me to help them implement JIRA or help them implement GreenHopper, which is now replaced by JIRA Agile. Bamboo, of course, is one important thing in becoming Agile. And then for documentation, people often have Confluence. Confluence is in place, is installed, but as it goes, often it's only used by a small group of people. The vast majority of people are still working inside Word and PowerPoint. To improve the adoption of Confluence, I therefore often add the SharePoint connector, so that people will have to use Confluence, or are more attached to Confluence, but still have the connection to the documentation and old history of documents in SharePoint. By looking at the challenges I stated out before, we dive into each of them now, starting with documentation. And looking at documentation, I think it's key for becoming Agile to have a centralized tool for documentation. And Word documents are not central. So Confluence is one of the most important things for becoming Agile and having a documentation linked up to all your issues. If you look into how Confluence is installed, then I have a few items that I want to point out in Confluence. First of all, is your diagrams. Many are used to working with Microsoft Visio or something, but I suggest putting your documents in Confluence as well, and use the plugin, the add-on, so that your diagrams are really in context. You can simply edit them for Confluence, and without leaving your application, you can update your complete document, including the diagrams. Then, if you have documentation, you have heard it in the keynote as well, and they're adding more features with each new release. Linking your documentation to your issues in JIRA is essential to keep track of your epics and your documentation. And what you can do already today is simply add a new issue link in JIRA pointing to a Confluence page. Just search for the page and you can select one from the search results. And also, the blank page problem, what is addressed as well with blueprints, use it. There are a few of them available already, but you can create as many custom ones as you want for your process. And what I've, for example, have been doing is create a blueprint for risk management on projects. If you look at that, then you get something like this, where you see your risks with the new status macro. So you have a good overview of your status and the score being calculated automatically out of impact and probability. This is a good way of documenting all your information in Confluence and having a clear overview all the time. But the most important thing I think is the planning effort in JIRA Agile. If you look in planning, then it's also important to have a good structure in JIRA. And JIRA is using projects to structure the issues. I find the term project a little bit confusing because the times I'm really documenting a project in JIRA is only, well, 10% of the times. It's merely teams or applications or processes that I'm configuring in JIRA. Yeah, but we have to stick with the project term because it's there. And what I suggest is having at least one project on portfolio level that's keeping track of the planning there. And that's setting out a roadmap and giving you a clear overview of the status of your themes there. And then on the program level, and that's, I think, essential, you want to have all your issues grouped by applications or components, at least technical components or artifacts that you actually deploy in your environment. If you do that, then you will be able to, later in the process, to review any changes in your feature set to your application instead of having your projects there. Projects are only 20% of the time of the complete lifecycle of your application. So when you're in maintenance, you want to go back to JIRA and see what epic and what story was being created in what version to be able to see if something goes wrong, what has caused this failure. Therefore, group your issues, epics and stories and around applications and components. Well, if you dive into the different levels of planning, first start with the team level. There you see your define, build, test teams. Define as late as possible in the program process what your specifications look like. What are your requirements and what are your exact specifications to these requirements. Document that as late as possible in the process. It's all about just in time. But as a developer in the sprint, you're not only developing stories, you're not only adding this value to the business, but you also have to improve your application to stay ahead of time and to be ready for future changes. So if you want to, if you see that you have to refactor something, do it immediately. And if you cannot do it in the same sprint, do it in the next sprint and create a refactor task out of it. And also these refactor tasks should be able to estimate it. So also you have story points on that one. And that's what is not by default installed in JIRA. That's not how JIRA defaults work. Of course, after a few sprints, you'll be able to measure your velocity, and your velocity is actually how much value you add to the customer each sprint. If you look at JIRA Agile, how many people are using the old classic views? I see only a few hands. Well, what I see is in many enterprises, people have not made the transition. And having not made the transition makes it very hard to do what I just told you. So if you want to implement this, make the transition to the new JIRA Agile Scrum boards and Kanban boards. It's essential to become more agile with JIRA. Because the new JIRA Scrum boards give you a clear backlog overview. And sprints that are not actually versions behind the scenes, but are real sprints. And if you've seen the keynote yesterday, then it will be possible in the next coming releases to connect your documentation directly to the sprint and to your epics. And that is a great way of keeping track of all your documentations attached to JIRA. Well, moving up, we look in the program level where you have the typical project manager or release manager, and especially the release manager has a key role here. He should want to track the epics on business and architecture. This is the technical and the business value epics, but probably also other tasks and works. But what's important here is you want to be able to distinguish between the different epics by business value. How much value you think you will add to the business. Well, for project managers, this is a whole new concept. They look into this. They have the traditional left triangle where they manage time and budget, time and resources, but fix your scope. In Agile, you need to change this. You need to, because your sprint has a fixed length, so your time is fixed. And your sprint is a dedicated team of people. So your budget is fixed as well, your resources are fixed as well. That's a rule. Therefore, if you want to control your project, you have to be able to change things in your scope. And I think changing your scope is essential as well, because over time, new insights might be coming from the business, and your priority in the backlog might change. So keeping your backlog prioritized at all times will make sure that each sprint you'll end up implementing the most important feature for your customers, adding this maximum business value. Well, on this level, you will also want to have planning. And this is not a Scrum planning. Well, you can do it in a Scrum over Scrums, and you can then also do the retrospective over retrospectives. But in JIRA, because you are looking at epics on this level, it's actually not possible at the moment to create a Scrum board on epics. It's not possible. What I'm using mostly is a Kanban board. And with Kanban, it's important to have the limits on the columns. Because limits, even the minimum limits, will make sure you're not working on too many items, but also that the column keeps filling up. So you pull your items, your work items from the columns previously. And for the program level, well, you have your backlog on the left. Then you have to do some analysis, because when you have your epic, you want to analyze just enough analysis to find out what your user stories are. And to do just enough analysis so that your developers can plan your sprints. And once you have done this enough analysis, your epic moves into the planning phase, where you plan them into the releases. And then finally, it's handed over to the developers for implementation. On this level, you'll have to manage your releases, the release train. And I do that with versions in JIRA, and each version for each application that I'm going to deploy into this production system. And I use the version numbers that are also used by Bamboo, or by, if you're using Maven, by the Maven deployment release tool. So I have traceability across all the tools I'm using. Well, next up is portfolio. On portfolio level, you have your enterprise architects. You have your portfolio manager, your CTO maybe, all these senior management. And if you want to get Agile to the maximum, you want to have these people use JIRA as well. And this is where they are looking at your business teams and your architectural teams. Where are we going to invest in for the next year or the next 2 years? And how much value will this investment add to the business. So again, we use Kanban to track this progress. And here you have about the same views, only you have this funnel of ideas coming in, and you want to do a selection of ideas to plan for the coming year. And it's, the reason it's so important to just enough specification at each level is because maybe half of your funnel is actually being implemented. The rest of the ideas are just discarded. And also here you have a level of analysis where you want to break your themes down into epics and then bring them on to the next level for implementation. What's also important is that you create a roadmap on this level. And the roadmap is then also a JIRA version, but now as a period in time, like a quarterly roadmap. But you can also do it in monthly roadmap, whatever suits your process best. And on the portfolio level, people want to manage the budget, because here your budget is created. You set a budget for the coming month or year, and you know how much it's going to spend because you have fixed sprints with a dedicated team. Minor changes can occur, people leave, people come, but the overall budget should be known and fixed up front. But there's also a very good add-on just now released that can manage your budget. And here you have a good overview directly taken from JIRA, from live data in JIRA, and see how your budget evolves over time and how your actual spending is evolving over time. This is one of the tools that is really now ready for enterprise use. What you also want to do is track your performance indicators, and you have a physical wallboard for that, but you can also create live data from JIRA into a television wallboard, and whatever works for you. And this will help your teams to keep sharp and to have some competition between each other to become better and better and better. Well, moving over to complicated infrastructure. I'm looking in a situation like this, about 70 applications in the front end, in the back end, in the mobile or web. But I've seen large banks with over a couple of hundred applications. If you are in a business where IT supports your organization's business process, I think that you have a box of applications that is in total supporting your IT. People working on this box make changes in features teams that go vertically through this box of applications, through this whole landscape. And they will touch many applications. And with the new JIRA Agile tool, it's now possible to create backlogs on filters that span multiple applications. But you might also have component teams along the way that are really focusing on a single application, and they have a different backlog based on that different application. So having the new JIRA Agile features available will make it possible to have a better backlog control and avoid the problems of these single major backlogs that I've seen been using. I talked about traceability already. Well, here's an overview of it. This same view, more or less, has been used in the keynote, where you see the epic name above, and then on the bottom you see the user stories that are implemented, that implement this epic, but also you see what epic it's realizing this theme, what team is realizing this epic. And very important, the documentation linked to this tool. This is in the latest version of Confluence 5.2, it's already available. You can use it from there. Well, to come to a conclusion, I would use these success factors in my organization to measure Agile. The Agile implementation team, removing all the impediments continuously over time. Create the 3 levels of planning, and even building up these 3 levels of planning in smaller organizations with 2 or 3 teams is valuable, because it will make sure that you manage to complete change process instead of only the development teams. having a roadmap, a vision, where are we going, creating business cases, how much value are we going to add. These are all items that go into this process on the different levels. And create your JIRA structure around your architecture. What components and what processes do we automate? And then have Scrum boards per team to manage all the different backlogs based on advanced filters to span multiple applications. So this is all to avoid big design up front and do just enough specification in every level. This is all to avoid a single big release versus small increments over time to add value to the business. It's all about fixing your scope versus changing your scope every sprint. It's all about a slow course change versus these small agile teams working together to get your organization up to speed. And with that, I want to thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please, I have 10 minutes.
All right, thanks. That was a great presentation. It's awesome to see that you can use JIRA on all 3 levels to do your reporting. So tons of questions, I'm sure. We'll start over here.
Thanks for a very practical presentation, some things we can take away there. So I've actually implemented this 3-tier system you're talking about in a competing tool. And I now am faced with having to do this in JIRA, so you've just solved a big problem for me.
Cool.
Specifically, the themes, is this an object or an artifact in JIRA?
It's an issue type, and you have to create it. It's a custom issue type.
So it's not, is there any interconnectivity between that and the epic? As in, do you get any traceability between the two?
Not as good as there is between epics and stories. What I've been doing is create a custom link type called realized and realized by, and the theme is then realizing the epic. This is just a custom issue type and a custom issue link type. Okay.
That's great. Thanks very much.
A custom issue link type.
Got questions for Sander? One over here. Yeah, one over there. We'll go there.
Just want to say thanks for a very insightful presentation. My question is, how do you, in your experience, how have you dealt with the managers or management that says, yes, we want to go agile, but then we need this document and we have to have design done before? How do you win them over?
First of all, it's a slow process. They have to get used to it. So take small steps. Try to move them towards Confluence. Have them using Confluence first, because that will make them have centralized documentation. Try to get them to use JIRA and help them set up the different views. Create Kanban boards for them, just specifically for them. Maybe not following these 3 layers I showed you before, but so that they have overview. And help the agile teams to work agile in the first place, because it's all starting there. If they work agile, then everybody else will slowly follow. And of course, the first half year, you'll run into many, many troubles, and you're not agile at all. But keep on measuring each sprint. How agile are we, and what are we going to fix in the next sprint? So take one item out of your list and fix that in the next sprint. And I think if you take them on the journey and show them what's being added for them, and in the end, they will be agile as well.
Yeah, so my question is about the lack of feature in there. Like I was doing something similar, and I'm trying to implement this at our company, and not having the feature, or the feature was always a question. Like where does that? Who's prioritizing features versus stories? Yeah. And I'm just curious what your take was. Why did you get rid of feature?
No, I'm not getting rid of features. I just renamed features to epics, because epics are better workable in JIRA Agile, because epics relate to the story so closely. So it's not by replacing features, but just renaming them into epics. And the planning of epics across sprints and the planning of features then across sprints, across releases actually, that's the job of the release manager. And there's a huge detail. You have this release train, which is actually managed by the release manager and the product manager and all kinds of people. They manage what's going in what release. And then the iterations follow accordingly. But if you want to do more details, check the framework, or I'll be up in the ecosystem workspace later on.
Cool. We got probably about 3.5 minutes, so we probably do 2 questions more. Are there any over there? There's one right behind you.
How do you how do you reflect testing in your overall picture from JIRA? I mean, I see stories represented and the different types of subtasks. Do you build that into your workflow as different stages of your workflow, or how have your customers been handling that?
Yeah, testing is part of your Scrum team. Define, build, test, and test is very important. And if you want to do Agile, automate as much as you can, because if you automate any repetitive task, you'll be able to do it quicker. You get feedback faster, and people don't make the mistakes over and over and over. Because if you have manual tasks doing 3-4 times in a row, you get 4 different failures out of this process.
So should you reflect that as far as, if you're wanting to show the progress of the different stages of testing, would you just reflect that in your actual workflow?
Yeah, you can do that. It depends. There's no silver bullet in implementing Agile. And it's all about looking in your own process and what's important for your own organization. And yeah, I definitely have been adding test steps into the workflow. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation.
No, welcome.
One more over here.
You have 3.5 minutes.
Yeah. First of all, it's a great presentation. Thank you. My question is, we have a lot of teams, and one of the complaints that they have is they cannot create epic of epics because our epics are so big. It's more like what version 1 does, so it's primarily we're having problems around scale. So how would you address that?
That's a good one. If you have these epics of epics, are these on actually the large roadmap items, like themes, maybe?
No, they are all released within in the same release or version here, what we call, but they are done by different teams. So
okay.
One epic, but individual epics across teams.
Yeah, what you can do, you cannot make epics of epics, that's for sure. What you can do, though, is create epics, and create one epic that covers it all, and then create a few other epics that you can relate to your parent epic as a blocking issue. So the parent epic can only be resolved as all the other epics are resolved. And in JIRA, if you have there's this blocking relationship in JIRA that will enforce that, I believe. I'm not at all completely sure, but I think it will enforce you that if you have any blocking issue left, you cannot close the parent epic. So I think that will be as close as I can get you.
Good one. Yeah, we could probably do one more quick one over there, maybe 2. We'll see how quick we get.
I see your diagram. I mean, I don't understand where do bug and tasks fit in, right? Because once you have an epic, then you create a story, then you basically cannot create a task. You have to create a subtask, right?
Yeah, of course. I haven't.
Because you mentioned tasks and subtasks. So
no, I haven't mentioned tasks and subtasks. So you're very right about that. Yeah. Of course, if you start implementing and planning your sprints with your stories, it's up to the teams to create your tasks and tasks based on the stories. And what I've been doing is either create a JIRA project for each team where they can store each of the different tasks that is linked up to the story, or just because it's only the length of the sprint, the task is not longer than 1 sprint, just use physical index cards on a physical wall board. That's also very practical. Then you still have your board on your wall where you can do your daily stand-ups with, and then once all the subtasks of your story are finished, you just drag the story to finished in JIRA and you're done.
Okay.
So that's what I would advise.
All right, we have one quick response to the previous question that we want to wrap up with.
Yeah, we face a similar issue around how do we handle cross-team work.
Yeah.
And the way we actually did it is I have two types of Scrum boards or planning boards. The first one is I plan around the products. And then what I could do is I have one epic but the stories can be assigned to different teams. And then what I do is I create team boards where all the stories from different epics will wind up in the teams.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah, it's a very good one, actually. Yeah,
Great answer. All right, well, thank you, Sander. Thank you, everybody, for participating. AC's back on. Yay.